Welcome, the anointed ones. Justice doesn't knock politely. It arrives in ways you never see coming. For centuries, history has proven the exact same truth. Those who plot in shadows always underestimate the light of accountability. It's not about chance. It's about timing, exposure, and the inevitable systems that turn against the ones who thought they were untouchable. Here's a fact that might make them sweat quietly in the back of their mind. Studies show that in over 70% of high-profile crimes, perpetrators are caught not because someone saw them, but because they underestimated the sheer persistence of evidence, systems, and human memory. You survived because the universe, the law, and divine timing were aligned against the chaos they tried to manufacture. Every move they made to erase you, silence you, or break you only strengthened the chain that now holds them accountable. They aimed to end a life, but in reality they were digging the grave for their own freedom. And let's be honest, nothing stings worse than realizing the person you wanted gone was the very reason your downfall arrived. And they didn't even see it coming. Your survival has become their reckoning. Every whispered plot, every manipulated story, every sleepless night they orchestrated is now a ticking clock, one that doesn't ask for permission. And here's where it gets almost funny. They spent years trying to master control over you, yet control is the one thing they've entirely surrendered to. Justice, timing, and consequence are not negotiable. They don't care about threats, intimidation, or bravado. They only care that truth, patience, and persistence exist. And suddenly those things are working against them. By the time this story unfolds fully, it won't just be about survival. It will be about the shocking, undeniable fact that those who tried to end your life are now racing against forces far bigger than themselves. And the most ironic part? The same people who thought they were untouchable will discover that every second of delay, every lapse of judgment, every hidden truth you preserved, has been quietly building their downfall. Number 1. They didn't fail because they were weak. They failed because they were exposed. Their failure was never about strength or intelligence. They were careful, calculated, and patient, believing they could control everything without leaving a trace. They built their strategies like a fortress, assuming secrecy and fear would shield them. But the truth has a way of seeping through cracks, even in the most tightly sealed systems. Every lie they told, every corner they cut, every hidden action became a thread that, when pulled, unraveled the entire operation. Exposure doesn't negotiate. It doesn't care about threats, intimidation, or clever manipulation. Once the light reaches what they've hidden, the fortress crumbles. They failed because they underestimated persistence. They thought short-term results could overwrite long-term consequences, but reality has a memory that never forgets. Every witness, every document, every overlooked detail is part of a web they cannot control, and webs are delicate. You can spin them with precision, but one misstep, one unnoticed slip, one overlooked truth, and the structure collapses under its own weight. That collapse isn't sudden. It's inevitable. It builds quietly, almost imperceptibly, until one day, what seemed secure is shattered. Their arrogance was their weakness. They assumed invisibility, believing that if they couldn't see you struggling, nothing was happening. They didn't realize survival itself was dangerous for them. Each day you lived, each move you made, each truth you preserved, became another layer of exposure. Their plans, which depended on secrecy and control, were eroding with every second you stayed alive. They weren't strong enough to face the consequences they created. They didn't just fail to eliminate you, they failed to protect themselves from the systems they violated. Exposure doesn't care about intentions. It doesn't care about excuses or explanations. It only demands accountability, and when it arrives, it's absolute. They thought they were playing a game in the shadows, but the light had already found its way in. They didn't fail because they were weak. They failed because they were fully, unmistakably, and inevitably exposed. Every action, every lie, every attempt to dominate you now works against them, proving that survival is not a miracle. It's the inevitability of truth finally catching up. Number 2. The moment they tried to play God, they signed their own sentence. When someone decides they have the right to control life and death, they cross an invisible line that no human power can truly protect them from. It's not about morality or emotion. It's about systems, consequences, and the natural order of accountability catching up. They believed that by manipulating, intimidating, or eliminating obstacles, they could bend reality to their will. But history is ruthless. Every person who attempts to place themselves above justice, law, or even basic human decency ends up unraveling the very control they tried to secure. They treated life like a tool, a puzzle piece, a variable they could move around without consequence. That mindset is dangerous because it blinds them to the forces already working against them. Once you take on the role of deciding who deserves to live, who deserves to succeed, or who deserves punishment, you automatically become a target, not of people, but of inevitability. Systems exist to catch those who overstep, and truth, like gravity, never fails. Their attempts to manipulate outcomes, to erase mistakes, or to rewrite history were doomed the second they overreached. Power based on fear is temporary. Control rooted in deception always has a hidden expiration date. They may have believed their actions were invisible, that no one could trace the web they created, but every plan has a blind spot, and every lie leaves a trace. What they failed to account for is that playing God comes with a price that no human scheme can avoid. They built their empire on sand, underestimating patience, persistence, and the natural checks that exist beyond personal influence. Their sentence was written the moment they assumed authority over your life. It doesn't matter if it took months, years, or decades to unfold. The universe has a way of balancing scales. What they thought was power turned out to be a countdown, and their arrogance ensured it would reach zero. Trying to play God isn't a strategy. It's a declaration of eventual downfall. And now, every consequence they face, every restriction or punishment coming their way, is simply the natural order correcting itself. They weren't defeated by luck or circumstance. They were defeated by the very act of overreaching, by believing they could control life itself while ignoring the reality that no one can escape accountability. Number 3. They didn't want you gone. They wanted you erased without consequences. What they were truly after was control, not destruction. Ending your life would have been simple in their minds, but that alone wouldn't have fixed the problem. What they feared most wasn't your presence. It was the truth that survived with you. Every act, every plan, every hidden agenda relied on secrecy. You represented evidence, accountability, and exposure. Killing someone is messy, unpredictable, and permanent. Erasing someone while staying invisible, untouched, and above suspicion, that was the goal. That's why they were calculated, patient, and cautious, because what they were chasing was not just silence, but impunity. Their fear of consequences shaped every move they made. They believed if they could remove you without leaving traces, no one would ever question them, no one would ever know, and their reputation, power, and freedom would remain intact. That's the irony. They didn't fail because you were strong, lucky, or protected. They failed because the very systems they tried to bypass exist precisely to catch people who assume they can escape accountability. Your survival, whether obvious or quiet, became a living record of their misdeeds. They didn't understand that life isn't just about being gone or present. It's about being witnessed. They underestimated the weight of memory, the reach of law, and the way patterns inevitably reveal themselves. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to cover up was like marking themselves for eventual exposure. Killing or harming you wouldn't have automatically erased that. It would have only escalated the consequences when truth surfaced, because systems, witnesses, and the natural order do not negotiate with fear or cruelty. What they wanted was a perfect erasure, a world in which they could claim innocence while their actions remained hidden. That was always their impossible goal. The moment your life persisted, the moment evidence survived, the moment truth found even the smallest opening, their plans unraveled. They are facing the reality that their obsession with control, secrecy, and impunity was doomed from the start. They didn't fail because you fought them. They failed because the universe, law, and truth are designed to protect what cannot be silenced. And in trying to erase you without consequences, they sealed their own downfall. Number 4, survival wasn't the miracle. The miracle was timing. They think survival is about luck or skill, but it's far deeper than that. What allowed you to stay standing, to endure every calculated attempt to remove you, wasn't chance. It was timing. Every life has moments when circumstances align perfectly, when opportunities for escape, revelation, or protection appear just at the right moment. They tried to force an ending, to cut short your story, but the universe had already scheduled the exact moment when consequences, justice, and truth would intersect in their lives. That moment doesn't come early. It doesn't come late. It comes precisely when their actions can no longer hide behind luck, manipulation, or intimidation. Timing is cruel to those who underestimate it. They spent years believing they controlled the narrative, believing that the sequence of events could be manipulated to their favor. They didn't realize that persistence isn't just a trait, it's a system. Every attempt they made to end you, to silence evidence, or to distort reality was feeding the timing that would catch them. What they wanted to happen fast, unseen and clean, instead unfolded slowly, allowing patterns to emerge, records to accumulate, and witnesses to remember. Timing ensured that their worst fears would manifest, not in chaos, but with undeniable clarity. The irony is sharp. Their obsession with control was what made timing work against them. They thought accelerating events would protect them, yet delaying reality ensured their exposure. Your survival, every step of the way, was not random. It was the precise alignment of patience, persistence, and timing that gave justice a window to operate. That is the real miracle. Not that you lived, but that you lived long enough for everything to catch up to them in ways they never anticipated. They weren't just thwarted, they were scheduled for downfall. What they tried to manipulate with greed, cruelty, and arrogance ended up moving exactly as it should, with inevitability. Survival exposed the truth, and timing delivered the consequences. Luck had nothing to do with it. What they faced, and what they will continue to face, is the relentless precision of life and justice moving according to a clock they can neither see nor control. Timing, not chance, wrote the final chapter, the number 5. They mistook divine patience for divine approval. One of the most fatal errors they made was assuming that the delay in consequences meant permission. They watched you survive. They saw their schemes fail repeatedly, and they convinced themselves that time was on their side. Every pause, every missed opportunity for justice, every delay in exposure, they interpreted as immunity. That assumption was their downfall. Patience isn't approval, and delay isn't denial. It's a warning disguised as calm. They treated divine patience like a blank check, not realizing that it is a period of quiet observation, of balance being restored invisibly before the inevitable strike arrives. They acted with arrogance because they believed the window of consequence was theirs to manipulate. They assumed that by waiting, by avoiding confrontation, by covering tracks, they could outrun accountability. But patience works differently than human reckoning. It allows truth to accumulate, allows evidence to line up, allows witnesses to remember, and allows the natural order to prepare the collapse. Their delay wasn't a reprieve, it was a countdown. Every day they acted with impunity, every lie they told, every action taken against you, only added weight to the consequences that would arrive with relentless force. They didn't see it coming because human arrogance blinds people to systems they cannot control. They believed they could bend time, manipulate circumstances, and even escape scrutiny. But patience is not weakness. It's power. It's strategic. It's the quiet force that observes mistakes, records injustice, and waits for the perfect moment to respond. Their failure was inevitable the moment they assumed their actions were acceptable because nothing happened immediately. By mistaking patience for permission, they underestimated the precision and inevitability of truth and consequence. They assumed the universe's quiet meant approval, but it meant observation. Their arrogance ensured that when the response finally arrived, it would be absolute, undeniable, and irreversible. Divine patience doesn't forgive, it prepares. And now, because they misread it, they are facing the reality that their every move, every scheme, every act of cruelty was building their own undoing while they falsely celebrated their freedom. Number 6. Their biggest mistake was thinking your life was the target. They believed their actions were aimed at ending you, at removing you from the equation, but they misunderstood the reality entirely. Your life was never the real target. Your existence was the evidence, the testimony, and the proof of their failures and intentions. Every scheme, every manipulation, every hidden move was designed to erase your influence, your truth, and the way you revealed their lies. Killing you wouldn't have solved their problem. It would have created new ones they could not control. Their real fear wasn't your survival, it was exposure. They didn't account for the fact that a person who survives under constant pressure carries more than a pulse. They carry clarity. Your presence, your ability to endure, and your persistence became a living record of what they tried to conceal. They wanted control over outcomes, but outcomes aren't controlled by fear. They're dictated by reality, evidence, and time. Their arrogance made them blind to the fact that you weren't just surviving. You were documenting, recording, and preserving proof of every misstep, every lie, and every malicious act. The longer you lived, the more impossible it became for them to remain untouchable. They assumed the threat was physical, immediate, and final, but truth doesn't rely on the moment. It accumulates, and it can't be destroyed as easily as a life. Every day you lived was a day that strengthened the very thing they feared most, the inescapable record of their actions. The irony is brutal. Their obsession with ending you only amplified the consequences for them. They focused on the wrong battle, thinking removing a life would remove the risk, when in reality, it was the life itself that carried the risk forward for them. What they underestimated is that you were never just a target. They were the ones being targeted by reality, by consequence, and by the systems that catch those who overreach. Your survival wasn't a miracle, it was the inevitability of truth asserting itself. They failed because they aimed at the wrong thing. They weren't trying to stop life, they were trying to stop exposure, and that is far more impossible than they ever realized. Number 7. God didn't protect you to keep you quiet. He protected you to keep you present. Your survival wasn't a passive miracle. It was an active force designed to ensure that truth, accountability, and justice could exist in ways they never expected. Protection is rarely about comfort or avoidance. It's about positioning. Every day you lived, despite the threats, schemes, and relentless attempts to remove you, You became a living instrument of exposure. The universe, law, and divine order don't need noise or spectacle. They need presence. By keeping you alive, he ensured that you were still here when it mattered most, still capable of bearing witness, still capable of existing in a way that destabilizes falsehood and corruption. They didn't understand this because their view of power is limited to immediate control. They assumed that if they couldn't destroy you, they had won nothing. But the reality is that surviving under pressure doesn't just preserve life. It preserves leverage. Your existence becomes a permanent reminder of their miscalculations, their arrogance, and their inability to dominate forces far beyond their comprehension. Every breath you took, every step you walked, every truth you lived by was a silent yet undeniable counter to their narrative. Presence in this sense is far more threatening than any retaliation they could engineer. Protection wasn't about preventing harm in the way they imagined. It was about ensuring that the systems of consequence, evidence, and divine balance had the time and opportunity to align. Your continued existence allowed the threads they tried to sever to stay intact. Witnesses remained, records accumulated, and patterns emerged. Their schemes required silence. Your survival ensured that silence could not exist. What they underestimated is that life preserved with purpose cannot be extinguished by force or fear. Presence is a form of power they never accounted for. The longer you exist, the more undeniable the truth becomes. They thought they were controlling outcomes by targeting you, but every day you remained present was a day that strengthened their undoing. Protection wasn't about shielding from every threat. It was about making sure the very thing they wanted gone remained alive, active, and inevitable. You weren't kept alive to be silent. You were kept alive to be unavoidable. Number 8. The law doesn't move fast, but it moves permanently. They counted on chaos, confusion, and speed to escape accountability. They believed that if they acted quickly and left no obvious trail, the consequences would never catch up to them. What they didn't realize is that the law isn't a reactionary tool. It's a system built to endure. It doesn't care about intimidation, threats, or clever manipulations. It doesn't bend to fear or arrogance. Unlike human anger or revenge, which fades or gets distracted, the law accumulates, it observes, and it waits patiently until the moment it can act decisively. That's why people like this fail. They focus on the immediate, the visible, the fast, while underestimating the slow but unstoppable precision of justice. Every document, every witness, every digital trace, and every hidden action eventually aligns in ways they cannot control. The law doesn't rush to judgment, but when it acts permanently. It doesn't need spectacle, it only needs truth. Their efforts to erase evidence, manipulate perceptions, or intimidate others only delayed what was inevitable. The law, unlike human schemes, does not forget, it does not compromise, and it does not forgive out of convenience. Every attempt to bend it, cheat it, or avoid it only creates a stronger chain for eventual accountability. They believed their control over the moment meant control over the outcome, but time is the law's ally, and patience is its weapon. What seemed like delays or loopholes were actually periods of accumulation, allowing systems to prepare for undeniable consequence. Their fear should have been not immediate retaliation, but the certainty that eventually no amount of planning or cunning could erase the record of what they did. They failed because permanence always outweighs speed. Quick actions may intimidate, manipulate, or hide the truth temporarily, but permanence ensures exposure and reckoning. The longer they tried to control the present, the more they sealed their future. The law doesn't move for convenience, it moves for inevitability, And when it does, it leaves nothing reversible, nothing negotiable, and nothing forgotten. Their arrogance convinced them otherwise, and now they face the unstoppable force they could never outrun. Number 9. Jail isn't punishment, it's containment. They think jail is about revenge, about making someone suffer for their actions. That's a human misconception. In reality, incarceration is a system designed to remove harm from circulation. It's a tool for stability, a mechanism to ensure that people who prove incapable of coexistence with law and morality cannot continue to wreak damage unchecked. They acted as if ending your life or controlling your story could secure safety or power, but the universe, society, and justice don't operate on assumptions. When someone consistently violates boundaries, harms others, and manipulates systems, containment becomes inevitable. Jail is not wrath. It's neutral, inevitable, and practical. They didn't anticipate the inevitability of containment because they've been conditioned to see consequences as negotiable, as something to delay, avoid, or manipulate. Their arrogance led them to believe that if they were careful, clever, or ruthless enough, no system could stop them. They treated law and morality as optional, as if human ingenuity could outpace structural accountability. But containment isn't about emotion. It's about necessity. It's a neutral reset, ensuring that those who cannot coexist within accepted boundaries are removed from contexts where they can continue to inflict harm. Every action they took to avoid exposure, every attempt to intimidate or erase evidence, only reinforced the need for containment. Systems are designed to correct imbalance. When a person accumulates enough risk, threat, or disruption, the response isn't subjective, it's automatic. Jail isn't a punishment for arrogance, it's a consequence for sustained inability to exist responsibly within society. Their sense of superiority blinded them to the simplicity of this truth. Consequences are structural, not personal. The cruel irony is that while they believed they could control outcomes through fear, manipulation, or even violence, the systems designed to contain harm don't require malice. They require presence of fact, pattern, and undeniable truth. Jail doesn't punish. It neutralizes. It ensures that the chaos they attempted to create can no longer spread. Their downfall isn't the result of anger, revenge, or personal vendetta. It's the logical outcome of their own actions colliding with the immutable systems designed to protect life, stability, and truth. Number 10. They are terrified because consequences don't negotiate. They've spent years operating under the illusion that fear, influence, or manipulation can control outcomes. They believed that if they were ruthless enough, clever enough, or patient enough, they could avoid accountability. That belief is what terrifies them now. Consequences are not like people. They don't respond to excuses, intimidation, or charm. They don't care about wealth, status, or power. They don't negotiate, delay, or compromise to make life easier for those who try to escape them. Consequences are relentless and impartial, and that is why those who thought they were untouchable begin to panic. They invested their energy in creating illusions of control, thinking they could dictate the narrative, the timing, and the outcome. They underestimated the inevitability of cause and effect. Every decision, every lie, every act of cruelty has been accumulating quietly, methodically, and invisibly. Consequences don't show up on demand, but when they arrive with perfect precision. They aren't swayed by pleas or threats, and they never forget. That's what makes them terrifying to the people who think they can escape responsibility. They exist independently of human perception and desire. The fear they feel isn't about you or anyone else. They are afraid because reality is finally asserting itself. They see the pattern of their actions, the evidence lining up, and the systems moving into place. There is no negotiation here. No plea bargain can erase the truth. No manipulation can redirect the sequence, and no amount of cunning can dissolve the inevitability. They were counting on control, but control only exists in illusions. Consequences exist in certainty. Their terror is rooted in understanding that every second they waited, every move they made in arrogance, every hidden crime is now aligning against them. They can scream, threaten, or hide, but consequences don't respond to fear. They only execute what has been set in motion. The realization that outcomes are no longer in their hands, that the world isn't going to bend for their selfishness, is what paralyzes them. They are facing something immovable, impartial, and unstoppable. And the stark truth they can't escape is that consequences don't negotiate, and they never will. Number 11. They know 1 second can undo decades of deception. Everything they built, every lie they told, every manipulation and hidden scheme exists on a fragile thread. That thread can be broken in a single moment, a moment that they cannot control, predict, or defend against. 1 second of exposure, one slip, one unexpected witness, or one piece of undeniable evidence can unravel years, even decades, of carefully constructed deception. That is the reality that keeps them awake, sweating and panicking in ways they cannot show. They thought their plans were permanent, that control was theirs, and that the past could remain buried. They were wrong. They underestimated the power of timing and the inevitability of truth. No matter how clever, ruthless, or patient they were, reality doesn't forget. Patterns emerge, stories align, and hidden truths eventually find their way to the surface. What they spent years hiding can be undone in a heartbeat. One recording, one testimony, one legal document, or one uncontested fact can collapse their entire narrative. They don't have to see it coming for it to happen, and that unpredictability is what terrifies them most. It's not slow justice that keeps them anxious. It's the potential for sudden exposure, sudden accountability, and sudden collapse. This is why survival, persistence, and presence are so dangerous for people like this. You weren't just existing. You were the quiet force that kept the thread intact, that ensured the 1 second of exposure would eventually arrive. Every day they underestimated you. Every action they took to remove you only increased the chances of that unraveling moment. They thought control over life and outcomes could protect them, but control over truth is impossible. Now they live knowing that nothing they did, no matter how hidden, is immune from discovery. 1 second is enough to undo it all. That is why panic replaces arrogance, anxiety replaces confidence, and fear replaces strategy. They are no longer in charge because truth moves independently of intention, and the realization that a single second can erase decades of planning, hiding, and manipulation is the weight they carry, an inescapable burden that grows heavier with every moment that survival persists, that evidence exists, and that exposure waits patiently for its cue. Number 12. God didn't spare your life because you were fragile. He spared it because you were dangerous to corruption. Your survival was never about weakness or vulnerability. It was never about being quietly protected while life went on around you. Every day you remained alive, every obstacle you overcame, and every hidden truth you preserved, you became a threat to the systems, people, and structures built on lies, manipulation, and corruption. God's protection wasn't a shield to keep you safe from struggle. It was a strategic placement that ensured your existence would disrupt every plan designed to erase accountability. Being dangerous doesn't mean being violent or loud. It means that your presence, your endurance, and your truth alone have the power to destabilize everything built on deceit. They thought that removing you, silencing you, or breaking you would protect them. What they didn't understand is that your life wasn't the problem. They were. Your existence illuminated their flaws, exposed their failures, and preserved evidence of their intentions. That's why protection came in forms that seemed subtle: timing, opportunity, and endurance. Every day you survived was another day that made it impossible for lies to remain hidden, and for injustice to stay unchecked. Your continued presence amplified accountability far beyond anything you could have engineered consciously. Being dangerous to corruption doesn't require confrontation. It requires persistence. It requires living, observing, and maintaining integrity where others tried to manipulate the world around you. Every time they assumed they could erase or destroy, they unknowingly strengthened the very force that would ultimately hold them accountable. Protection ensured that you were not removed from the equation at the precise moment when truth, evidence, and consequence aligned. The irony is brutal. They tried to dominate life, to control outcomes, and to erase you, yet their downfall came precisely because your existence could not be extinguished. God didn't spare you to reward innocence, or because you were fragile, or to prevent suffering. You were spared because you were the obstacle they never accounted for, the unmovable force that made corruption, lies, and manipulation impossible to hide. Your survival became the ultimate threat to their power. Number 13. Justice doesn't need your anger. It only needs truth to stay alive. They believed that if they could provoke rage, intimidate witnesses, or silence voices, they could escape consequences. They counted on emotional responses, distraction, and chaos to protect themselves. What they didn't realize is that justice doesn't rely on anger, revenge, or confrontation. It relies on truth. Truth is persistent, patient, and indisputable. It doesn't need dramatics, it doesn't need emotion, and it doesn't get exhausted. Justice only requires that truth survives, that evidence remains, and that integrity holds steady long enough for consequences to take shape. They underestimated the quiet power of existence. Every act they took to intimidate or erase you wasn't enough to stop truth from continuing its work. Lies can only last so long before patterns emerge, and systems of accountability are designed to recognize those patterns. Justice doesn't move according to their timelines or their emotions. It moves according to what is undeniable, what can be documented, and what persists beyond personal will. Their attempts to provoke chaos, manipulate perception, or suppress evidence only accelerated the process, because truth accumulates in ways that emotion cannot erase. The dangerous part for them wasn't confrontation, it was consistency. Your survival, presence, and persistence were more threatening than any argument, fight, or emotional response could ever be. They thought that if they could break your spirit or manipulate perception, they could bend reality to their advantage. What they failed to see is that truth is not bendable, not negotiable, and not dismissible. It continues quietly, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself fully. Anger may be loud, but truth is unstoppable. Evidence, testimony, and fact are forces they cannot avoid, ignore, or outrun. The more they try to control outcomes through intimidation or manipulation, the more they reinforce the structures that would hold them accountable. Justice doesn't care about your personal feelings. It only requires that truth exists, that it is preserved, and that it is undeniable. Their failure wasn't a result of human intervention or retaliation. It was the inevitability of truth asserting itself, independent of anger, fear, or their desperate attempts at control. Number 14. The real terror isn't jail. It's being remembered accurately. They fear more than confinement or punishment. The thing that truly haunts them is the permanence of truth and the clarity of memory. Jail, sentences, and consequences are temporary in the human sense, but how they are recorded, remembered, and reflected in history is eternal. Every act, every lie, Every manipulation leaves a trace, and those traces live far longer than the walls of a cell or the length of a sentence. Their terror lies in the realization that no matter how much control they once had, the story will be told exactly as it happened, and they cannot erase it. They spent years trying to manipulate perception, control narratives, and hide evidence, but they failed to understand that being remembered accurately does not depend on power, influence, or intimidation. It depends on truth, persistence, and exposure. Every witness, every surviving document, every piece of proof contributes to the story that cannot be rewritten. They may hope that people forget, that details blur, or that chaos covers their tracks, but memory has a way of enduring beyond intention. The record of their actions, the reality of their choices, and the weight of their consequences cannot be negotiated, bribed, or silenced. What terrifies them isn't the immediate discomfort of punishment. It's the long-term, unavoidable reckoning that comes when their deeds are understood exactly as they occurred. The fear is psychological, relentless, and absolute. No strategy, manipulation, or delay can undo the fact that their actions will be remembered clearly, and history will hold them accountable in ways that cannot be appealed or erased. Their influence, control, and attempts at dominance evaporate against the permanence of accurate memory. The irony is crushing. They tried to erase others, but in doing so, they exposed themselves to an unchangeable record. Jail confines them physically, but being remembered accurately confines them morally, socially, and historically in ways they never imagined. The real punishment is not the sentence. It is the certainty that the world will know the truth. And that knowledge, once established, cannot be reversed. Their terror is justified, because being remembered accurately is far more inescapable than any walls, locks, or legal restrictions. Every single move they made, every plan they executed, every attempt to silence, erase, or dominate you has failed, not because of luck, not because of chance, and not because of weakness on their part. They failed because truth, persistence, divine timing, and consequence are forces far greater than human arrogance. From the moment they tried to play God to the moment they realized that exposure and accountability cannot be stopped, their downfall has been inevitable. They mistook patience for permission, survival for vulnerability, and presence for insignificance. But every miscalculation has only accelerated the unraveling of their carefully constructed lies. You survived, and that survival is more than proof of strength. It is a weapon against corruption, manipulation, and deceit. Every day you existed, every truth you preserved, and every step you took in integrity became a threat to their schemes. Jail, punishment, and fear are secondary to the ultimate force they cannot escape, being remembered accurately. That is the weight they will carry, the silent, unshakable reminder that their arrogance, cruelty, and attempts to dominate were recorded in ways they cannot erase. This isn't just a story of survival. It's a blueprint for the inevitable consequences that follow those who try to control, harm, or erase what they do not understand. It's proof that no matter how careful, ruthless, or patient someone believes themselves to be, truth, timing, and divine justice are unstoppable. They couldn't end your life, and now they face the reality that their every move has been building toward their own undoing. You are living proof that survival is more than endurance. It is revelation, accountability, and the unstoppable force of truth. If this message resonates, if it opens your eyes to the power of truth, survival, and divine timing, don't just let it pass. Subscribe to the channel for more content that exposes the hidden realities others try to suppress. Like this video to show that truth matters. Comment your thoughts and experiences, because sharing knowledge strengthens us all. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because survival, truth, and justice are forces that grow stronger when they are acknowledged, understood, and amplified. Your presence, your engagement, and your voice are part of this unstoppable cycle, and together, nothing built on deceit can remain unchallenged. God bless you.